Can you tell us a little bit of, what's your thought after the committee today?
I definitely have a huge sense of hope and excitement for the future. Justice Obama did a wonderful job with all the responses. She was very thoughtful and very responsive to all our questions. She did fabulous.
For Indigenous people to have justice named to the Supreme Court of Canada, what does it represent? And after what she gave as answers today, how do you see that particularly? What's going to be your contribution from your perspective?
Well, for me as an Inuk, when I see role models that I can connect with, it's so meaningful. And I think what she represents is so many Indigenous peoples feeling like they can see themselves in her, and to have a sense of hope and determination for the changes that they can see to improve, to have improvements in Canada that will be so important following today's hearing.
Sorry, but can you just explain again what happened with the translation this morning?
Unfortunately, there was a couple of things. There were technical difficulties this morning that we couldn't have it go from Inuktitut to English to French, so that had to be addressed. But then, in addition to that, there were challenges with the interpreter. Unfortunately, had a family emergency, so she had to leave. Unfortunately, so the question wasn't interpreted in the way that I had hoped it would be asked, which is okay, I guess. But hopefully, things will improve as interpretation services for Indigenous speakers are.
You think her nomination will? You think her nomination will improve that?
I hope so. I think that with Indigenous languages, with Canada, it has to be a goal that we always have to strive for, especially with reconciliation. And I hope that she'll help lead the importance of understanding the need for access to justice with Indigenous languages.
Today we heard Justice here say tell an anecdote regarding the Pocahontas of the North. It is a figure of discrimination that Indigenous people in Canada live every day.
Yes.
To have such a high-profile representative going to the Supreme Court and taking with her this baggage, what does this kind of discrimination being addressed by someone of her status bring to the table for the Supreme Court of Canada in your perspective?
Knowing that she grew up in a rural community with an Indigenous background creates also an opportunity for more discussions. I loved her responses when it came to addressing questions related to systemic racism. It's all about making sure that we have open communication and education, because for too long, Canada's colonial history has been hidden from Canada's mainstream education. So not only are Indigenous peoples victims to Canada's treatment, but so are regular Canadians who have been robbed of that history as well. So I think that this kind of appointment creates that opportunity for those open conversations to happen, so that we can do it in a safe way, in a comfortable way, so that we're creating understanding among each other, and why we need to have better resources for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
I act today with great humbleness and just being a part of this historic moment for our country, for Indigenous people. I've been going to Indigenous Bar Association meetings since I was for more than 20 years as a student, and then as an academic and as a parliamentarian. And the advocacy for so many years of looking at the Supreme Court of Canada that was making decisions on our treaties, on our language, on our laws, on our lands, and knowing that the members of that court never really understood who we were, never really understood what it means to be Indigenous in Canada, never understood what it is to be a person who learned the treaties as a young person, and to see that reflected today is just astonishing. I never thought that I would be in the position I am today to see an Indigenous Supreme Court nominee and to go through this process and just to see just the amazing person and the amazing ambassador and the amazing role model that she's going to be for Indigenous people all across the country. It's just nothing short of amazing. I tell people it's a good day to be Indigenous, but today is a good day to be Canadian as well.
You said that you advocated that particularly for many, many years to have an Indigenous person on the bench. Is she the right candidate for the bench? Because it's one thing to want to have Indigenous people on the bench, but at the same time, is she, from your perspective, the right person, the right fit for that, and why exactly?
I absolutely think that she's the right person. To hear her background, to hear her pursuit of education, to hear her pursuit of the Indigenous language that she continues to learn, and everything that she's gone through, I think she's an amazing selection. It gave me great pride to hear her speak words in Abenaki as a start to her words. As a Mi'kmaq person who speaks the Mi'kmaq language is very similar. I understood a lot of the things that she was saying in that language, and it just filled me with pride knowing that, and hearing her answers with such dignity, grace, but also just very concise and intelligent answers. I have a great deal of hope for the Supreme Court of Canada moving forward.
And now, what's next? I mean, now that she's going to be on the bench, what do you expect from the Supreme Court now?
Well, it's an interesting time we're living in, because one of the things that, as chair of Indigenous Caucus, we had advocated for was an Indigenous Governor General because of our relationship with the Crown and our treaties. The next thing we had advocated for was an Indigenous Supreme Court of Canada judge as part of Indigenous Caucus, and I truthfully have to sit and reflect what's next. We've got a lot of work to do in reconciliation in this country, but each one of these appointments is something that Indigenous youth can look to and say, not only do we have an Indigenous Supreme Court of Canada judge, but we also had Indigenous parliamentarians with not just part of the Liberal Party, but the NDP party, who were part of this process and got to ask the questions. And it's a great time in our country to be Indigenous, and I think that there's just so many people out there really proud of this moment, and it's a long time coming. But I can't help but think of all of the professors that I had in law school, all of the pioneers within the Indigenous Bar Association that have worked for 20 years of advocacy to get to where we are, and just to thank all of them for their advocacy, because without them, we're not here today.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Mrs. Bonsamin talked a lot about education. Do you think it's the inflection that Supreme Court should have today?
Absolutely. I think that the more we understand... I think the more we understand about our shared history, the better our decisions are. One of my jobs before this was to be treaty education lead of Nova Scotia, and a lot of the times people said, why weren't we aware of this history? Why weren't we aware of the things? Why wasn't this shared with us as part of our courses in university or high school? When we get to that knowledge, when we're able to understand, and I think Madame Bonsamun said it best, in order to understand where we're going, we have to understand our past. And we, in Canada, are only starting to scratch the surface of understanding the Indigenous histories in this country and what is meant to be an Indigenous person in this country. But it's definitely a proud moment for all Canadians today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
Bonjour.
Tout va bien?
Oui, vous?
Oui, vous avez de l'air heureux.
Oui, très heureux.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites de la séance qu'on vient juste d'avoir?
Je crois que ça a été une belle prestation. Nous avons beaucoup appris de la vie de la juge Bonsamun. Et je crois que tout le monde a apprécié son honnêteté, sa sincérité, le fait qu'elle est très, très humble. et aussi très, très intelligente. Donc, ça augure bien pour l'avenir.
Parlez-nous peut-être du processus, les prochains jours, les prochaines semaines. Évidemment, vous pouvez la nommer. Là. Il ne semble pas y avoir de roadblock d'ici là.
Oui, oui.
C'est quoi les prochaines étapes? Là?
C'est maintenant le Premier ministre en consultation avec Mme Simon, donc la gouverneure générale, qui doit effectivement confirmer le tout.
Est-ce que vous avez une date de confirmation?
Non, j'en ai pas, mais ça devrait arriver dans les prochains jours. Je sais que la Cour doit siéger à Québec au début du mois de septembre et je crois que le juge en chef voudrait avoir un complément de 9 juges pour aller à Québec.
Le juge Moldaver va quitter le 1er septembre. Est-ce que le 1er septembre?
C'est jeudi. Est-ce que c'est jeudi?
1er septembre.
Oui, mais j'avais ce jeudi en tête. Mais oui, il a...
Est-ce que vous voulez avoir la confirmation d'ici à son départ?
J'aimerais avoir, oui. Oui, j'aimerais l'avoir.
La juge a raconté une anecdote très personnelle par rapport à la Pocahontas du Nord. J'aimerais savoir, vous, est-ce que vous connaissiez cette anecdote-là de discrimination pure là, à son endroit, qui a une influence quand même sur la juge qu'elle est aujourd'hui?
C'est la première fois que j'ai entendu l'histoire. Donc, j'ai été dans la pièce quand elle a raconté l'histoire. Donc, c'est très choquant. Évidemment, on voudrait pas avoir de telles histoires dans nos tribunaux, dans notre société. Mais ça existe, ça arrive. Et donc, la façon dont elle réagit est très importante. Et la façon dont elle a non seulement réagi, mais internalisé l'incident. Et effectivement, je crois que ça a eu un impact de la pousser encore plus fortement vers son métier. Donc, le métier d'être un très bon juge.
Comment croyez-vous que ça peut influencer peut-être maintenant les juges en place et l'institution qui est la Cour suprême du Canada d'avoir quelqu'un qui a vécu cette discrimination-là dans son...
C'est toujours un atout d'avoir quelqu'un qui a vécu certaines choses personnellement. Donc, elle va participer dans les discussions des arrêts. Il y a une chambre juste en arrière de la salle des audiences à la Cour suprême où les juges se siègent et où ils discutent les plaidoiries et les cas devant eux. Donc, c'est très important d'avoir quelqu'un qui a vécu de telles expériences. Et ça va être Elle a beaucoup parlé de l'éducation. Et effectivement, l'éducation en continu. Donc, ce n'est pas la formation professionnelle, c'est plutôt la formation d'une vie. Et donc, en parlant avec les autres juges, en échangeant avec les avocats, les plaideurs, avec ses auxiliaires juridiques, elle va avoir un impact quotidien, justement à cause des expériences qu'elle a vécues. Et donc, c'est très, très important.
Ma dernière question, c'est dans la shortlist que vous avez eue, est-ce que c'était la seule juge autochtone?
Je ne vais pas parler de la liste restreinte. Évidemment, c'est confidentiel. Mais je peux vous dire que j'ai fait des efforts en tant que ministre d'encourager les personnes à faire des demandes à la magistrature et je sais que le président McLaughlin, le président du comité, il a lui aussi fait des efforts pour encourager les demandes.
Est-ce que vous avez considéré un autre juge ou un autre juge autochtone?
Dans l'avenir?
Ouais. Non, dans ce processus-là.
Encore là, je vais rien dire. OK. Merci beaucoup.